Greetings! This video is about JavaScript and jQuery events and event handling. Since JavaScript is an event-driven language, it has events for just about everything. The events that we have been using the most up to this point are mouse events, and they are just one of the many events that can be handled. This list here is just a small sample of the many. One problem with the JavaScript events is that not all browsers behave the same way with the same events, since the W3C specs are fuzzy. Also, a browser may choose to implement its own behavior of the event. One easy solution to this is to use a JavaScript library that ensures compatibility among the different browsers and includes many event-related features and fixes. As a result of these problems, we are going to use jQuery for event handling. Attaching event handlers using jQuery is done through a function, not through an assignment. To use jQuery events, you need to first have a jQuery object or use the jQuery function and then call the event type. The field to be passed in is the event handler, which is to be called when the event is triggered. In jQuery, the word on is dropped from the event name. For instance, in native JavaScript, you would call onClick, but in jQuery, this would simply be click. When an event is handled, an event object is passed to the event handler. This is an optional field. The event object contains information about the event itself, such as the element that triggered the event, the type of event, and even methods for stopping the event. Unfortunately, the event object doesn't work the same in all browsers, but jQuery's event system normalizes the event object according to W3C standards. jQuery's event object is guaranteed to be passed to the event handler. Most properties from the original event are copied over and normalized to the new event object, but not all event properties are normalized for cross-browser consistency. Here is a list of events that have been normalized. Target, the DOM element that initiated the event. Related target, another DOM element involved in the event, if any. Page X, the mouse position relative to the left edge of the document. Page Y, the mouse position relative to the top edge of the document. Which, for key or mouse events, this property indicates the specific key or button that was pressed. Meta key indicates whether the meta key was pressed when the event was fired. jQuery event objects contain additional properties such as: is the event cancelable? Was the Ctrl or Alt key pressed? And mouse position data in relation to the screen, the browser, and the element that triggered the event. jQuery also adds enhancements to stopping or manipulating the propagation of the event chain. For instance, if the default event action can be stopped with prevent default, or if the entire event chain can be stopped with stop propagation. The jQuery mouse clicking events are click, double-click, mouse down, and mouse up. Click is a completed action. The mouse is pressed and then released, whereas a mouse down and mouse up are single actions that are triggered independently. jQuery's mouse movement events bind to native JavaScript events, or jQuery has enhanced events or events for cross-browser compatibility. Hover, for instance, has two events. The event is first triggered when the mouse enters the element and then triggers again when the mouse leaves the element. During the duration of the two events, the mouse is hovering over the element. It prevents from having to watch both mouse over and mouse leave. For cross-browser compatibility, jQuery's mouse enter and mouse leave events are proprietary to Internet Explorer. Because of the event's general utility, jQuery simulates this event so that it can be used regardless of the browser. The event object passed to a mouse handler has these properties about the mouse position: client XY, screen XY, and offset XY. Client X and Y is the coordinates within the browser window. Screen X and Y is the coordinates on the screen itself. Offset X and Y is a position within the element. Let's take a look at this mouse event example. Whenever the mouse is moved over element with ID target, each of the coordinates are displayed. As we can see in this example here, when we are in the uppermost left corner of our pre-element, offset X and Y is almost 0. Screen X and Y reflect the distance from the upper left corner of the screen, and client X and Y is the distance from the browser window. When JavaScript code is executed, it runs inside of an object. Since all JavaScript code runs inside of an object, the reference to the current object can be referred to as this. By default, the code runs in the global window object, so the default of this is the current window. Any global variables declared become part of the current window object. Whenever event handlers are unobtrusively attached to elements, that event handler is bound to that element. This means that whenever the event is fired and received by the event handler, this keyword in the event handler refers to that element rather than window. In addition, even if the same event handler is assigned to multiple elements, each gets its own bound copy. In this example here, no matter which element triggers the event, either text box or save becomes this. Use of the keyword this is very helpful for code reduction. Instead of having to check the name, ID, type, or whatever of each element to see which one triggered the event, that element is known. As in this example here, the same event handler can be set to input types with the name of ducks using the jQuery function, and each input is bound to its own handler and will be referred to as this in the handler. Let's reduce this value-specific checking to a single line of code using this. Instead of having to check each value, we'll simply call this.value, which contains the value of the control that triggered the event. The window object events are load, unload, resize, error, and context menu. We've already seen how to use window.onload for unobtrusive JavaScript. We've also seen how to replace this event with the jQuery function, which is a quicker way of attaching the ready event handler to the document.isReady event. Keyboard and text events happen when the user presses or releases a key, or when an element gains focus or the focus is lost. Focus on an element is when the user enters an element or it is selected. For instance, when a user enters a text box, that text box then has the focus. Blur is when the user leaves that element. When a keyboard event is triggered, the following properties are available in the event object. Key code is an ASCII integer value of the key that was pressed. Alt key, Control key, and Shift key will return true if any of those keys were pressed. In order for the event to be fired, the element with the event attached to it has to have the focus. If you need a global event for a keyboard event, then one solution is to attach it to an area where it will be in scope, such as to the form and not to a specific element or to the page body. Forms also have events that can be handled in JavaScript. Aside from the usual events of focus and blur to be used for knowing which control the user is using, the controls themselves have the events of change and select. The change event is sent to an element when its value changes. This is limited to input elements, text area boxes, and select elements. For select boxes, check boxes, and radio buttons, the event is fired immediately when the user makes a selection with the mouse. But for the other element types, the event is deferred until the element loses focus. The select element is sent to an element when the user makes a text selection inside of it. This event is limited to input type of text fields and text area boxes. The form element itself has the events of submit and reset. When the form submit button is pressed, the submit event is fired. The reset event is fired when the form is being reset. jQuery has also added the focus in event. The focus in event is sent to an element when it or any element inside of it gains focus. This is distinct from the focus event in that it supports detecting the focus event on parent elements. In other words, it supports event bubbling. To stop the propagation of events, jQuery's event stop propagation method can be used, as in this example here. When the form submit button is pressed, the data is first checked. Instead of having the server-side code check the data and reset the form if it is incorrect, we can use JavaScript to evaluate the data being submitted and halt the event and prevent the data from being sent to the value in the action attribute of the form. Our HTML consists of a form with an action attribute, an input box, and an input submit button. In our JavaScript, we tie into the submit button event handler. In the event handler, we then evaluate the length of the value in the text box and make sure that it is equal to 2. If the value is equal to anything other than 2, we issue an alert method and we stop the propagation of the event. Otherwise, the form event proceeds as usual.